This is the Fixer Punk Podcast, the podcast that hopes that the UAW gets all of its demands, but especially its demand for a 32-hour work week to set the standard for the rest of the country. I'm Grayson Peltier. So on today's episode, I wanted to talk about the need for flexible work with dignity and the ways that capitalism exploits those who really, really need a flexible working environment or arrangement, especially with the whole return to office push, which we've talked about quite a bit in the last, it's probably been in the themes of the last 3 episodes, but especially a little bit more in the last one, talking about the return to office push, how it disproportionately affects people with disabilities, people who live further from major cities, people who have caregiving responsibilities, whether that's a caregiver for an older person or caring for a child, stay-at-home mom. And this has been a theme that's actually been going on for a long, long time about how capitalism crushes those who are desperate to get flexible work and those who really need it. And I haven't done a dedicated episode to this particular issue, so I thought I'd go into this. I know that we have a couple other topics where we have series going, which those are the ones around the different areas of personal growth influencers, the Andrew Hubermans, the personal finance ones that I've been talking about, like Dave Ramsey and Caleb Hammer. Those critiques are still coming, but I felt like I needed to get to this issue first and do a one-off episode. And again, this is the first time we're recording on the TikTok, or actually not the first time, this is the second time we're recording on the TikTok Live. And I want to say hi to anybody who's joined us. And I am glad you're here. The Fixer Punk Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. So you can join us after there. Thank you for joining, everybody. But I'm going to get on with the episode. So this has actually been around for quite some time. I know that the whole idea of remote work or work from home, those things, the gig economy seems like it's a relatively new phenomenon. But the demand for work, thank you for the likes, Dane. The demand for flexible work with dignity has been around forever. I remember back in the 2000s seeing all of these commercials on TV talking about working from home, these business opportunities, your own at-home business. And those things all turned out to be MLM scams, multi-level marketing scams. And that was because even back then, there were a lot of, like, say, stay-at-home moms, people with disabilities that couldn't adapt to the daily Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 commute, in-office job type situation. And capitalism has always found a way to prey on these people because the work is out there. There's tons of work out there that can be done on a more flexible basis. The pandemic proved it, that people could go and they could be effective at their jobs. They could do a great job at their jobs, but they could work from home on a more flexible schedule. Maybe they're gonna be able to pick up their kids to help them deal with family issues during the day, personal issues, medical appointments, things like that. And they're doing more than fine. They're doing great during the pandemic. But now we see that the people in power want to take back their power and they want to force people back into the office for real estate values, but also for that locus of control that managers and business people oftentimes feel. But the other side of it is, even for those who don't pull back, they know they sense the desperation that some people have, that it's really their only choice to try to stay remote or to even have flexible jobs, to even have gig jobs. Things that aren't remote jobs, but like the gig economy, like the Ubers, the Lyfts of the world. Gig economy positions have been very accommodating for people who can't do a normal working schedule. And those companies have been pulling back on pay, like I believe Uber Eats, but I know Instacart and DoorDash, there were a lot of complaints about minimum pay going down. And this is really an unreported on issue, and I think that it's also a new frontier for the labor movement, because we're seeing increasing numbers of strikes. We are seeing an increase in people wanting to go on strike and make changes. We are seeing that in the more conventional economy, and we're even seeing it in the more, I guess, the more precarious, more flexible type work in terms of like retail part-time work, like the Starbucks workers. That's a good development. But in terms of gig workers, there is definitely some work to be done there in terms of unions and organizing. And I think it's very good work, because there are people that are in these positions who desperately need them. The end of all labor organizing should not be just to only work with people who are working a conventional 40-hour work week. It should be to work with those who are even in they're working different schedules than that typical situation. And it's very important, because these are often the people that are getting exploited by capitalism the most and have the absolute least choices. Again, these are the people, especially the MLM space, the multi-level marketing space, I think is perhaps the biggest and most profound example, but not the only example for sure. There are some really subtle, interesting examples, especially when it comes to the disability community, of people being preyed upon and being used by capitalism in a very, very interesting way, because they're desperate for a flexible source of income with dignity. The MLM space, of course, the stereotypical multi-level marketing salesperson is somebody who is a woman that is staying at home with her kids, a mom who's staying at home with her kids, and needs the income. Oftentimes it's not even that. Oftentimes it'll actually be not the stereotype. It'll be someone who's working still, and they still don't have enough to pay for childcare, for the cost of rent, the cost of food, all the stuff that's going up. And they get taken advantage of by multi-level marketing companies. And the multi-level marketing companies, all they do is they siphon out their savings, and the earnings on these things are notoriously low. Even if you make a profit on them, you're going to probably wind up making less than minimum wage in most of these multi-level marketing companies. But then on the other hand, you have people with disabilities. You have people with autism in particular that have an 85% rate of unemployment. And these are very smart, very talented people that oftentimes are very knowledgeable about a particular field, but because they don't conform to the normal workplace cycle, maybe they're going through some sort of autistic burnout, maybe they have commitments in the middle of the day. If you have to go, say, to like a doctor's appointment or to therapy appointments on a regular basis in the middle of the day, that's going to be a big problem. Even if it's like a telehealth therapy session, that's pretty embarrassing. And oftentimes you don't have a private place to do that at work if you're going to go into your car or whatever. So that's going to be a disturbance. That's going to be an issue for people. And that's why remote work was so great, because people with disabilities, mental health issues, needed to do therapy, needed to go to a doctor's appointment during the day. They could step aside. They could still come back, do their work, have privacy, even if they're doing a telehealth doctor's appointment, things like that. And what was interesting, and I think that this is a connection that not very many people have made, but back when the whole Wall Street bets thing was a trend, there were a lot of like almost like a derogatory, derisive use of the term autistic to refer to the people who were involved in Wall Street bets, who were trying to do this investing to bring in some cash, bring in some money. And oftentimes you'd see extremely extensive in these forums, like a lot of very, very comprehensive financial analysis on these companies, and doing a lot of work, even more than, in some cases, some people in the personal finance space. But they're saying, well, these are people with autism, and they're saying it in a very derisive fashion, which someone myself who has autism, obviously it wasn't necessarily, some of the things that are said were not very good. But the fact that there is this connection between people that are doing this work of investing and manipulating money and trying to find any way out of the regular employment system, because there's even these jokes of like, look, I was able to, I don't know how much of this is based in reality, but the fact that it's a joke and jest sometimes comes to truth. That you have people saying, oh yes, I was making so much money investing in the stock market and Wall Street bets, but now I'm forced to go back and work at fast food because that's all that I can get. Meanwhile, they're putting together analyses that look like they're written by some investment firm. These are people with excellent potential that can write well, that can do a lot of math, do a lot of numbers, but they're not given that opportunity in the conventional workforce because they may have some sort of limitation. And especially as we start to see high unemployment and we have the kind of people like that guy who was saying that there needs to be pain in the economy, that guy who was saying there needs to be pain in the economy in order to put the workers back in place. That pain in the economy is going to be disproportionately felt by people who are the most vulnerable, people with disabilities, working parents, people who are of minority ethnic groups. And that's who's going to feel the pain the most, unfortunately. And those are the people that are going to get picked off, and it's going to be harder to get accommodations in the workplace, even though it is already hard. And there's going to be this vacuum, this need for flexible work with dignity that is going to persist, and it's never gone away. And when they're able to get these positions, the thing is that if somebody with a disability is able to get a job that works with their needs, that gives them accommodations, a lot of times employers feel like they can really take advantage. A lot of times the workplaces that'll be most accommodating to people with disabilities are going to be workplaces that are exploitative. The workplaces that have more flexible scheduling oftentimes are really crappy retail jobs that are very exploitative and don't pay very well. Those types of places are going to... Oh, hi, Joey. Thank you for joining on the live, and thank you for liking the live as well. But these types of places will be the places where they're able to find a job. And they are going to take advantage of that because they feel like this person's locked in. They don't have mobility. They can't go from my employment because I'm the only employer who will put up with their nonsense, even though it's just basic human decency that they're showing. They're not even showing basic human decency because they're not paying them well. And that is a big problem in our economy. We have the people who need these opportunities the most who are least able to get them. And when people who are seeking these flexible work opportunities go in and talk to other people and seek mentorship on, say, like the forum for work from home, that WFH subreddit that I've mentioned in a few of my videos on TikTok as well as on this podcast, they are being shunned. They're being like people come in there with sometimes the saddest stories, like, I have a disability, my back hurts, I can't go into the office, I'm being told I have to return to the office, I need accommodations, they're not going to help me to find out what I should do here. And they're almost mocked by other people. And it's that intra-class fighting between members of the working class feeling like they're better than the other. So it is a myriad of problems that come up for somebody who is in a more of a marginalized situation trying to make it in this economy. And capitalists know this. They know that when that person finds that perfect opportunity, they'll view it as a miracle. They'll view it as a blessing from God. If they find a job that's more flexible with them, they will view it as like a miracle, and they know that they have that power, and that if they adjust pay or they do things, they can shave a little bit off the top. That person's not going to complain because they can't go anywhere. And you see this even like with Uber drivers, with the DoorDash, with Lyft. You'll see those. They'll just keep like tinkering around and just trying to keep people. Trying to just find little ways to make themselves a little bit more profit because they're thinking, oh yeah, a lot of these people, even though there are plenty of people who are working Uber, Lyft, DoorDash full time, they think these are people who are desperate. They have no other choice, so we can just take advantage of them. And that is a big opportunity for labor. Some of like the most like exploitative jobs that I've had have been people that they're doing like they're offering me like remote freelancing and stuff like that because they know that there are fewer rights. And I'm a member of my union. I am a member of the freelancers union. So I'm part of an organization that is helping to find a solution. Obviously, they've done a little bit. They've made some progress in New York and Los Angeles with something called the Freelance Isn't Free law. But it's far from being enough. There's actually a guy on TikTok. I'll have to find his page, but he was joking about how if you're a worker with a disability, they're always going to classify you as an independent contractor or find a way to classify you as an independent contractor and then try to pay you on a net 90 cycle. Thankfully, I haven't had to deal with a net 90 cycle yet. And I do have my own business. I do have my own consulting practice. I do both marketing and communications for businesses as well as political and advocacy communications. The political and advocacy side has slowed down because it's not an election year and 2024 donations are down. But if you're interested in that, if you happen to be somebody who's running a business or running an advocacy project, nonprofit campaign, feel free to reach out to me on the offspeedsolutions.com website. I will link that in the description of the episode as always. And if you have any stories of things that have gone wrong with your jobs, if you had crappy bosses, bad employers, people that have taken advantage of you, even if it's like in a freelance employment context, feel free to call in and leave a voicemail on the message line. I will try my best to get these into a future episode. 844-477-PUNK, 844-477-7865. I'm hoping that at some point that as these live streams grow that I will be able to have like a mixer board on here and I'll be able to like plug it all in, have the audio be all nice. So if you want to create more of an environment where we can chat with each other and help each other through the problems that we're experiencing during this time, the problems that we're experiencing in capitalism and with the workplace, then if you want to gift, or you can also subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/FixerPunk. Hello to everybody who's joined. If you want, you can leave your where you're from in the comment section or in the chat if you are watching the live on TikTok. Again, for those of you listening on the podcast, this podcast is being streamed on TikTok as well, tiktok.com/@FixerPunk. And if you want to be notified of those, then just make sure that you follow on the TikTok. And that is going to be something that I hopefully do on a more frequent basis. This is more of a lecture episode. Normally I'm doing this with the more casual chat episodes, but I thought let me just be on here so we can get this message, this progressive, pro-labor, pro-worker message to more people and help more people, especially those who are in marginalized situations in life, to become better and to get more out of this system that is trying to drag us all down. And the thing is that a better world is possible. The money for jobs to help people that need flexible work exists. The work exists. There's plenty of good work that needs to be done that people who need a more flexible schedule can do. There's lots of good, talented people out there. There are lots of good, talented people across the country who have disabilities, who are at home caring for somebody. There are lots of people who want to work like an extra time at night, that can do excellent work, that can really do work that benefits society. People that are actually doing work that benefits society. I talked about universal basic income on the last episode. There are lots of people out there that are doing tons of work that's uncompensated. But it's very important work, that caregiving work, that volunteer work, the stuff you do in mutual aid. That's why I think that UBI is such an important policy, but that's not the point here. The money exists, the work exists. What doesn't exist is the will of the powerful. Thank you to those who have joined as well. But yeah, what doesn't exist is the will of the powerful to change things. And that is something that the labor movement can do. And as we start to see in the more conventional workforce, we start to see the impact of organized labor, like with the UAW, with SAG-AFTRA, with the WGA, the Writers Guild. There are some other strikes. I think there's a strike coming up of healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente. I think we can also start to see change around remote work and around flexible work and around people that have like these more gig, precarious type jobs. And there are, and the type of stuff, like if you are a very competent, this actually happened to me back when I graduated from college from USC. If you're looking for like remote work, it got better during the pandemic and it's getting worse again. But back then, that was 2017. I was basically I was constantly working on like that Amazon Mechanical Turk thing, which is basically training AI. And those jobs maybe pull you out like $1 to $5 an hour at most. So people don't even see this side of the economy. Most people don't even see this side of the economy where if you're at home and you're not this person who can come in professionally to an office, how badly you're going to get screwed over in this economy. People aren't even aware of this labor. Maybe it's because you don't see necessarily a physical picket line. But we know that a lot of movements have started online. A lot of social movements, a lot of the most important social movements of the last 20 years all started online through people spreading awareness online. So even in terms of the way we think of activism, the way we think of labor advocacy, this type of space online is very, very important. And unions should not be afraid to organize workers who are in remote positions or that aren't in the same location, because it can still be powerful. Thank you to everybody who has joined the live just now. If you want, write your where you're from in the chat so that I can see it and shout you out. And that is really that's the message I want to give here, is that we can find a way to change this, and we're seeing how these changes can be done, but this continues to be a major problem. We continue to see that as we start to see this further return to office push, which is covertive layoffs, really, we're going to start to see more and more grifting around people that are desperate to get remote jobs and people that are going to get scammed because we have not accommodated them in the legitimate economy. Of course, there's the notorious YouTube fake guru space too. Just like I was talking about the MLMs earlier, the multi-level marketing scams. Those people, especially say for younger disabled people or younger people who had to, during the pandemic, move out to their parents' homes in more remote suburbs and rural areas that are more distant from high-paying employment, and they can't move back to those areas because we're not converting the offices into housing. We don't have enough housing for them, and the pay hasn't gone up. In fact, the pay is going to come down because they want to put workers into place. Those people are going to take that last bit of savings that they have possibly from the COVID pandemic, from when they had those jobs, and it's going to get taken by various types of online business scams. And that is going to be a very unfortunate situation, is that we're going to have a lot of people who are desperately in need who are getting taken advantage of. And this is an area that progressive and labor activism really needs to continue to work on, because this is the most raw form of capitalist exploitation there is. Because especially with like independent contractor classifications, you're throwing people into basically running a business who perhaps don't have any understanding or expertise of how to do so. Now, I've been an entrepreneur for some time. I understand how these things work, but a lot of people that just go into these things coincidentally, they get screwed over, and it's hard to get paid back. And the wages that you're winding up getting are a lot lower. And we can get better, and people deserve to be treated better. People deserve the opportunity to have flexible work with dignity. And the only reason why a lot of these tasks that have to be done, that employers saying, oh yeah, this has to be done, you have to be present in the office for collaboration purposes. No, it's because they want their power to be fed into. They want to feel powerful over people. They want to feel like people are under their thumb when this work could be done at home. And of course, they use the threat of outsourcing. They use those types of threats, the threat of AI taking over. And all that means is that the power of capital is too strong. And that's the thing is, and this is sort of almost a separate rant, but people are willing to accept a lot of economic pain and frustration and problems. They're able to, just when they say, when the media says there's a recession coming, and then things are going to get bad in the economy, people just take it and lay down, and they're like, oh yeah, there's a recession coming. But really, when we talk about a recession, oftentimes these are things that are caused by the actions of the very wealthy and those in power. That's what a recession is. In this case, if it's here, it's the and thank you to those who have joined on the TikTok live. Again, this is a TikTok live recording as well. Fixerpunk.com or TikTok.com /@fixerpunk if you're listening to the podcast and you want to be alerted for to join the live chat community when we do it. But the whole issue that we're seeing is that people are just willing to, or the media at least is telling people, just making it sound like recession is some natural phenomenon that you can't control, when it is in fact controllable. Here we have the interest rates. The interest rates are something that the Fed is literally manipulating with the purpose of increasing unemployment. But people are going to say, oh yeah, it's just a recession. It's a recession. That naturally happens, and workers are going to be out of work, and people are going to get treated like crap at their jobs and not be able to leave them. That's just going to happen because that's a recession. But then as soon as we start talking about workers taking action, as soon as the media goes in and talks about a strike or things like that, they're like, look at how the devastation in the economy, all the money the economy is going to lose because of the actions of the workers. Meanwhile, when they come in and talk about a recession that's being driven by the things that the corporatists and the government leaders that are being paid for by politicians want, government politicians are being paid for by corporate people, what they want, it's just like, oh, it's just a natural, they treat it just like it's a natural disaster, like it's a storm or something. And it just isn't that way. So when we think about the frustrations in the economy that may come from strikes, just think about that. Think about the fact that any frustrations and agony that you see in the economy due to a recession is really due to the actions of the wealthy, either intentional or unintentional or just straight up negligent, like the 2008 financial crisis was. And the actions of fellow workers are going to be they're going to be a lot less. It's not going to be as noticeable for like the UAW strike. Like very few people are going to notice that if they go on and strike long term. But when they talk about these things, just know that, and know that we should be as accommodating and as generous to our fellow workers as we are to the capitalist class. I think I'm going to sign off right now. I might leave the live and the live chat open for a bit longer. But I think I've discussed what I want to get out there, which is that this desperation for flexible work with dignity is something that is a very important cause for people who are among the most oppressed and most marginalized in our society. It's the next frontier of labor organizing, in my opinion. And unfortunately, it's the next frontier of scams and people being taken advantage of because they can't be all the things that capitalism conventionally wants its quote-unquote good workers to be. So keep an eye out for scams and think about ways that we can help. And think about policy on a larger scale. Like a lot of cities are trying to put workers back into the office to get local tax revenue to increase, which I think is just asinine, that you have to bring workers into the office to overspend on like random things during the day, like lunch and coffees and stuff like that, to keep the local economies going. But these things are going to have, the return to office is going to have a negative impact on a national level on issues related to disability, on issues related to climate. So if we get good people into office, we can start to turn the tide and have it be that governments are encouraging people to work remotely, encouraging employers to treat people with disabilities better, because those do have societal benefits. And those things are as economically measurable, if we care about them, as the whatever marginal increase in local small business revenues and local tax revenues would be from sending people into the office. Though these metrics are more important, actually, because we're caring about people. They're more important, helping people with disabilities and helping to reduce the carbon footprint. Those are things that are more important. And if we elect people into office that care about those things, then we can start to see a positive change as we're working to organize workplaces and have strong grassroots mobilization as well. If you want to be a part of that, there are a lot of great organizations out there, but I am hoping to spread the word through this podcast. Please subscribe to this podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. Subscribe to the Fixer Punk podcast. Make sure that you follow on TikTok at Fixer Punk, on Instagram at Fixer Punk, on Twitter /X at Grayson Nation. You have we're going to try to do more of these live shows as well on TikTok. So make sure you get your notifications on TikTok, so we can start chatting with each other. This is more of like I guess you could call a lecture episode, where I'm talking to you and explaining something, but I want to do some more casual chats that maybe won't be a recorded podcast episode. If you have any issues, things, any experiences that you want to talk about, the call-in number, 844-477-PUNK. You can always call in. And I hope you will join me again for the next episode. And for those of you who are listening on the TikTok, I am going to keep the live stream open just a little bit longer. But for those of you listening on the podcast right now, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you will join me again for the next episode.